So, ladies and gentlemen, again, if you're not specifically asking a question to Coach McEvoy, make sure you put yourself on mute, please. If I need to, I will go in and mute for you. This is going to be recorded, and I am going to put it up on YouTube, and I will have that link available tomorrow. Kind of each week, I ask and see, with the guys that participate, if I feel like they're sharing some secret sauce, because we've got some dudes that have really been loyal to this little roundtable we're doing, I protect it and don't put it out there. But I've talked to Coach McEvoy. He is on board with me making all of this available on YouTube. And so I'll record it. I will get it uploaded at some point tomorrow, and I will share the link on social media. But feel free to hit me up afterwards, obviously, if you want it. And so without everybody having to look and listen to me, man, Coach, I'm going to spotlight your video. I'm going to give you the floor, and we appreciate you coming tonight.
Hey, Pete, I appreciate it, man. Like I said, I'm really excited to be here. Always excited to talk quarterback play and quarterback development in general. Let me piggyback your statement and not claim to be a guru either, but certainly been involved doing just quarterback specifically for a long time. So I at least want to share my thoughts and my ideas, and really want this to be as much of a conversation as we can get going here. So do not hesitate. I told Pete earlier, so what I'm thinking about is talking some kind of general quarterback mechanics ideas, throwing motion, maybe some key coaching points. We won't go super deep, but just graze the surface with maybe some things with your quarterbacks that you maybe should be keying on, and give them a couple, really usable coaching points they can focus on to make small corrections in their throwing motion. And then we'll kind of jump right into some drill stuff. I have a ton of them, everything from, how we go through the warm-up, warming up the arms and shoulders, and then into, all of our off-platform movement type drills and creating different situations. I have no idea where everybody's coming into this at. So as Pete alluded to, I've been putting a lot of stuff up on Twitter and Instagram. So if you guys have seen a bunch of the drill videos, then, we'll just touch on them quickly and keep moving. If you have some specific questions about certain ones, or you need a little bit extra information, then we can dive deeper. And then, like I said, I got 3 or 4 or 5 extra ones that kind of nobody's seen yet. So, Pete gave me the call. I figured we'd throw in a little something extra for Coach DeWeese. So, and then lastly, my world now is from that private aspect, but I was a high school coach for 11 seasons, both in Pennsylvania and in Georgia. So I think about developing quarterbacks, not just setting them in now, but I don't know if all you guys are as well. So if we want to get into some kind of thoughts on maybe how to set up individuals during the week or game week, or how you progress through, we can get into all that stuff as well, if that makes sense. So I am going to, let me share my screen here. I'll pull up some thought processes here on the kind of the general mechanics of the throwing motion, and we can kind of talk through it. As my screen is shared, I'm not going to be able to see the chat. So what I'm going to do is kind of take it piece by piece, and I'll check back in, or Pete, maybe feel free to interrupt me if there's some good questions that I need to, provide a little clarity on. So
sounds good.
So hopefully everyone can see my screen here. Just talking about kind of general throwing mechanics. And we all know that there's, 72 small specific pieces of the throw, and we can go deep in there. But I think it's important for any quarterback, especially guys that you're starting to kind of develop, maybe as an 8th grader transitioning to a freshman or up through high school, that we give them some realistic things they can focus on. And that's kind of what I've tried to nail it down to here. So we're just talking about on-platform throws, right? Your normal stationary throw. First things first, consistent pre-pass position, right? There's a lot of variability here in what's comfortable for each quarterback. And I think it's important that we allow that to be different quarterback to quarterback, right? You don't want the quarterback holding the ball above his head or holding it at his waist, but, sometimes we can get a little too over coachy with all these things that maybe you saw Tom Brady do, and I want my QB to do exactly that. I think this is a good opportunity to allow your quarterbacks to have some flexibility, but the non-negotiables are he has to be comfortable in that position, and it has to be a repeatable position so we can do it consistently. So as I talk about consistent pre-pass, we're talking about being stable, right? Stable, a lot of people talk about stability as they talk about balance, obviously very similar. The difference with stability is you're also able to resist a force, if that makes sense, right? So if you think of a quarterback or anybody with a really, really wide base, right? Their legs spread out as far as they can. They're balanced, they're not falling over, but all it takes is a slight push into his chest and he's going to be knocked off his base, right? So when we talk about stability, it's not just balance, but it's also that I can resist a force if someone were to push me. That should be our goal at the top of every drop, whether we're under center in the shotgun, quick game, all the way into our 3, 5, 7-step drop. And the second piece there is that we're creating straight line throws. So much of what we talk about from the throwing mechanic standpoint is going to be throwing the same way every time. And that starts with creating the same straight line throws. I talk about the hallway being set here, which is an old National Football Academy's term. If you're familiar with Darren Slack and Dub Maddox and Will Hewlett and those guys, you know, they kind of talked about setting the hallway. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So as I alluded to earlier, I'm focusing on the quarterback throwing the same way every time. So we simplified to going from good start to good finish, right? The second big coaching point there is that the arm is fast. So when I talk to my QBs from, you know, the early 5, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade kids that I start training all the way to our guys in the NFL, the coaching points they'll hear me say the most throughout a session or throughout a training is stable and arm fast. And we'll just continue to reiterate those 2 key points. Because once again, those are things that the quarterback can identify and understand and focus on, where they might not be able to focus on, you know, 17 different points of his arm path along the throw. Arm fast and fluid, that idea of the arm accelerating as quickly as we can, will be the key point to our elbow leading the throw every time and allowing us to be consistently accurate. Extending out to the target, the next piece, you know, just exactly what it sounds like. We want to make sure we finish that throw all the way out to the target. That'll create really tight spiral on the ball, get that good ball flight we're looking for. And then the idea of staying vertical through the throw. So if I was talking about what are the 4 things I want to focus on, it's that. Good start to good finish, arm moving fast, extension out to the target, and then staying vertical through the throw. And I didn't realize it looked so strippery, that little analogy there, but on the pole is what I have my quarterbacks think about. You know, imagine they have a pole going straight through the top of their head, straight down through their crotch. And so from the entire throwing motion, from the initial drive step, all the way through the turn, through the finish, the idea of staying nice and tall on the pole as they rotate is a key piece here. How we doing? We okay so far? Anybody need to chime in and me hit any of those points?
I think we're good so far, Coach. Guys, make sure you're on mute, please. Go ahead.
So as we talk about good start, like what are we actually talking about? What do we mean there? So for me, it's about getting the foot in the ground as quickly as we can, right? A lot of times we'll talk about stride length and, you know, that quarterback strides too long. It's an overstride, or, you know, the length of a stride is something that's hard to distinguish and hard to identify. And it's definitely really hard for the quarterback to try to understand as he's throwing, right? Because he doesn't know what a 6-inch, 9-inch, 1-foot stride is. But if we can just get in his head that he needs to get his foot in the ground quick, we'll achieve the purpose that we want. I always coach the idea that quick foot, like a quick step, is a short step, right? I can't overstride quickly, if that makes sense. So foot in the ground quick's the key point there on the good start. At the same time, so coinciding with that lower body movement of the foot in the ground quick, we want to have good fluid separation and to that kind of equal opposite position, right? So we talk about pre-pass, the ball being kind of in the middle of our chest, that initial separation, just the 2 hands separating off the ball, that's what separation is. And we want to make sure that not only are we creating kind of the beginning of the arm path, which will allow the arm to be fast and fluid all the way through, but we also want our front arm to mirror our throwing arm. You know, and that's a missed piece sometimes, where you'll see quarterbacks work arm path and they're really focused on this idea of keeping the front shoulder closed, not letting it open up, which we're going to talk about and is super important. But don't get that confused with not allowing the arm to separate, the front arm, as we start the throwing motion. When we talk about being fast and fluid and that idea of great arm acceleration, the reality is we need that balance. So I need the front arm to mirror the throwing arm to create my body's ability to go as fast as it can. Third point there on the good start is we want to minimize the linear movement. So you guys have heard, and now more than ever, I think quarterback coaches, top to bottom, are doing a much better I don't know why I drew a blank on the word. We're doing a much better job, I guess, of understanding that quarterbacks are rotational athletes, right? You know, baseball players and pitchers, you know, there's a lot of linear movement involved, but, you know, quarterbacks, very similar to golfers or baseball hitters, are rotational athletes. So any linear movement is going to detract somewhat from the amount of rotational power we can create. It goes to the point about the overstride, right? So as we get that foot in the ground quick and we stay on the pole, that point I made earlier, those are ideas, once again, of not allowing a big lateral movement or linear movement from our back foot to our front foot as we throw. There will be a natural hip slide. We can get into that more down the road if I need to clarify that, but we want to try to minimize that linear movement as best we can. And then the last piece of the good start is that dissociation, right? Just the idea of the hip and shoulder kind of disconnecting on the throw, right? So I talked earlier about, you know, we want to let the front arms separate, but that's not to be confused with allowing the front shoulder to fly open. As our hip starts to throw, our hip is going to work to get our front foot in the ground quickly and slightly off the midline. But as that move happens, the shoulder has to stay closed. So that's the point when we talk about dissociation. It just simply means that the hips are going to start to open, but the shoulder is going to remain closed. The combination of the shoulder staying closed is what delivers consistent accuracy. How we doing, guys? We good on the good start so far?
Yes, sir. So one question.
Go ahead.
You know, referring to disassociation,
Yep.
would wringing the towel be a good analogy for visualization, right? Guys that'll use the towel and, you know, pull it through and ring the bell, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Not even so much for dissociation, but for the entire piece of what we're calling. So in the same way we talk about good start, good finish, we talk about the sudden start, sudden stop of the throwing motion, right? So as we create this beginning dissociation piece, that kind of creates the torque, allows us to transfer the power that we generate from the ground up through the core, right? The transition from ground force into rotational force, that kind of creates the beginning of kind of the towel snap. But what creates that snap and the whip effect is the sudden stop. You know, we talk about the deceleration phase of the throw, and we can get into that a little bit. And it kind of ties into good finish here, where I'm going in a minute. But just so we're on the same page, what Pete's talking about is, you know, you're going to snap a towel at your buddy, right? We're going to coil it up. And that's the idea of the dissociation, creating that tight coil. But what we know is if all I do is kind of throw the towel out at my buddy, but I don't stop the front arm, if I just keep it going, I'm not really creating a whip effect or a snap of that towel. All I'm doing is just like a feather, just kind of brushing by it. But if I start the towel and then stop the front hand, that creates the snap effect. So that idea of not just the sudden start, but the sudden stop is what we're looking for there to create that whip effect of the thrower in this case, or the quarterback. Make sense?
Yes, sir. Next question. Somebody referring to the foot in the ground quick.
Yeah.
Would you say the front foot is the most important foot in the good start position, or the back foot?
Huh. Okay. So let's think more inside out. All right. So let's try to change the way we're looking at this altogether. It's really the idea, and once again, we don't want to go down a rabbit hole of getting really fancy, but all of our movement's going to start from the biggest parts of our body on the inside, right? So our hips, you know, our glutes, our core. It's the idea of proximal movement versus distal movement. So anytime we think about what's the most important, let's think about those big key pieces. So I answer that question saying, don't even worry about back foot, front foot. Let's think about the hips, right? The hips will be what kind of moves the feet, if that makes sense. And the hip is what's going to create and kind of start the sequence. I can, even without knowing the person who asked the question, I may have lost them a little bit. So let's not think of one being more important than the other, but let's think about how they work together, if that makes sense. The back foot is certainly important because that's where you're going to generate the beginning of your power. You're going to create that ground force up off the back foot. And the front foot getting in the ground quickly and slightly off the midline is going to be starting to create that dissociation and create the rotational power. But both the back foot and the front foot are really triggered by what the hip is doing.
I know coaches, so Sean and I sat down before the season last year and talked a little bit, and he walked me through some things, and we talked about my quarterback, and I showed him a couple clips, and we teach it. We're in the gun. We teach a punch step as our first step, and his timing was off because his punch step was a real deep step, and it was getting him out of balance, and it was slowing down the timing in his drop and trying to sink it in with the timing of the routes. And the foot in the ground quickly coaching point, I would tell him shorter step, and it didn't translate. When I said get the foot in the ground quicker, it shortened itself, right? Just that process of realizing how he did that. And then, it helped him fix that. But then, it helped him create that balance, right? And it became more about the hips and less about the feet. So if that helps you understand it. Coach, the next question, somebody said, you you drill disassociation. There's the famous clip of Dak in his warm-ups, right, that became quite the meme. But I know I'm going to let you get to that, obviously, because you can talk about how you guys handle that.
Yeah, we did for a while, and now me personally have really gotten away from it quite a bit. The reasoning is because it's kind of a heady thing to think about in the throwing motion. And so this idea of really actively firing the hip aggressively, similar to what, and obviously we all know by now that what Dak was doing was not the best version of that Tom House drill, right? If you see Jimmy Garoppolo do the drill or Aaron Rodgers do the drill or Tom Brady do the drill, you see a little bit more of what that's supposed to look like. But it's with great intent and great purpose. But, I think for most of the quarterbacks that we all work with, there's a risk of him being too focused on this aggressive firing of the hip, and all it's going to do is kind of throw off his natural sequence. So, as I talk about the few things I threw up here, on this document, aggressive firing of the hip, you're not seeing here, right? We want to have things that are a little bit easier for us to think about and easier for you to kind of quickly, with a common language on your QB, be able to communicate the same idea.
Thank you.
Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yep. Cool. So let's just transition quickly to the good finish. So, we talked about the good start, and now the finish is, the way we want that quarterback to control and stay stable through the entire throw. And this is one of the biggest things that you see with really every quarterback. I was going to say my younger quarterbacks, but I'd be lying if I didn't see a ton with the college and NFL guys as well. This idea of finishing stable. We talked about the good start. We talked about being stable at the top of the drop, but we can give away so much power and energy at the end of the throw by not finishing under control and finishing stable. So goes back to that sudden stop point that we were talking about earlier with the towel. If we over rotate or kind of walk through the finish, we lose a lot of power and it doesn't go out through the football. So when we talk about the good finish, it's all about being stable. We want to keep that front knee soft, right? And a lot of us know at this point, we've seen QBs, that idea of the front leg locking out, which can cause a tilt by the QB and a tendency to pull down on the football, right? It's a very common thing we see in a lot of quarterbacks throwing motions. One of the key things we want to try to get rid of. So from a coaching point there, I'm kind of, and think about your pre-pass position, your knees are bent. And as we work through the throws, we kind of rotate and stay on the pole. I like to tell my quarterbacks to think about staying down through the hips, right? So not standing up through the finish, but staying down through the hips as we rotate. Keep your pad level consistent. That'll finish with that good front knee soft position. We also want to finish with our hips square to the target. This goes back to that deceleration and the sudden stop again. If our hips kind of over rotate past the square to the target point, all we're doing is wasting an amount of power and energy in a direction away from the target. And I'll show some clips here and we can talk about that a little bit later. It's an easier one to see visually. Chest up, we talked about the leg locking out, sometimes leading to that tilt forward. So the idea of keeping the chest up, finishing tall from the waist up is another good coaching point there on the finish, and stabilizing the front side. So this is kind of ties in. We talked about, and I'm doing this left-handed here, but we talk about the front arm kind of separating on the initial separation, letting that arm be fluid. And then about the halfway mark of the throw, we need to make sure that front side stabilizes as the throwing arm continues to accelerate through to the target. If the front side gets lazy and we kind of, finish all the way back shoulder to shoulder, we have a tendency to not create as much of a whip effect as we could. And really, from an accuracy standpoint, we're really risking that slashing motion. So for a right-handed QB, if the front shoulder either opens early in the beginning or doesn't stabilize on the finish and continues to open on the finish, we have a tendency to create kind of a slashing motion, which results a lot of time in the ball missing left across the body or low to the left side. Does that make sense for good start, good finish? Some key focus points there. Let me bring up some video here. Now you're testing to see how quickly I can transition from word to my video stuff. But let's start with Malik because I got it in slow motion here.
Reshare the screen, Coach.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah. That's what I always forget to do.
I didn't even know that was a thing. All right, so stop share again, and here's my video stuff. Okay, you guys with me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. All right, so consistent pre-pass position. Here's Malik. I'm going to show you Jamie in a minute here, Jamie Newman, and it's interesting to see the two of them because they obviously have different ideas of what feels comfortable for them in pre-pass. And then as we go through the entire mechanics of the throwing motion, you can see some differences in both of those guys. Once again, we're going to embrace those differences. As long as they're hitting our non-negotiable and our key points, we can have a lot of success, even though you'll see both of these quarterbacks throw very differently. So here's our pre-pass position, good base, knees are bent, nice and tall from the waist up, and good, comfortable pre-pass like ball carriage position. So as we start to throw, we're talking about the good start position. First thing we want to look for here is the foot being in the ground quickly, and that should coincide with his idea of separating to equal out. I'm going to kind of let it play through and then pause here. Right, so as we go back here, and hopefully you guys are seeing the video as well as I'm seeing it on my screen. You can see as he starts his throw here, he's thinking about getting that foot in the ground as quickly as he can. And at the same time, separating. You can see how his front arm separates along with his throwing arm into that good equal and opposite position. So we're, maybe a tenth of a second into this throw, and we've already now created the starting position that's going to both allow our arm to be fast and fluid, and it sets us up in a position to be under control and stable through the throw. Kind of let it play through to the next piece here. This is the good start position we're looking for. We'll let it play all the way through as his arm accelerates to the target into our good finish position. So you can see Malik has a little bit of a tilt, right? We talked about staying on the pole, so ideally you'd love him to be more upright all the way through the throw. And Malik also has a tendency to kind of let his hips over rotate slightly, right? So let me go ahead and get this all the way to the finish again so I can hammer home those key points. Foot in the ground quick, good separation. You can see the arm accelerate out to the target, right? You guys are familiar with some key positionings here. So horizontal L up to vertical L, and here's the elbow accelerating through into that lead position. You can see how the elbow's in front of the chest. You also get a good shot here of seeing how he's starting to stabilize that front arm. You can see his left arm there starting to stop as his throwing arm continues to accelerate. Here's our good extension out to the target. You can see the ball is past the elbow before it leaves the quarterback's hands. Those are some things we talk about when we talk about extension. And then, you know, the one thing with Malik that we continue to kind of work on is staying a little bit more upright and a little bit more of a violent sudden stop. So you can see right now, if you look, imagine Malik's wearing a belt. If you can picture where his belt buckle is, you can see it's kind of pointing maybe across the field to the opposite sideline, right? Knowing that his receiver is straight ahead from where he is, we know that he wasted some of his power. It didn't all go out the football to the target, but some of that power and energy is wasted to the left. I'm going to kind of bring back here and we get a similar look from behind Malik, and you can kind of get a better idea here as that plays through. Same thing in slow motion again, foot in the ground quick. You can see the foot gets slightly off the midline. You know, that's a point that's important, but a point more and more with the quarterbacks I work in that happens fairly naturally with most of them. So when we talked about what's the key coaching points in a good start, I just said foot in the ground quick. I didn't have to highlight this, get the front foot off the midline. And there's a bunch of coaches that I respect that don't even feel there's a need to get off the midline. So we might differ slightly there, but, you know, either way, foot in the ground quick. And like I said, most quarterbacks will naturally get their foot slightly off the midline. I think it's important to allow the hips to clear through. But anyways, I saw it there. So there you can see the good equal and opposite position. And then as we let it play through, as his elbow accelerates, you can see from this angle where his hip ends up finishing, right? So his hip now pointed almost to the goalpost there on the left. Now, how much energy, how much power did he waste? I don't know, 5%, 10%, right? I don't know the answer to that. But without a doubt, that slight over-rotation caused him to waste a little bit of power away from the target. So we'll go to Jamie here in a second and kind of get a different idea. And with Jamie, you'll see how he does a much better job of that sudden stop of the throw. I'll let this one play through a couple times. Foot in the ground quick. You can see Jamie has a much different upper body separation. He's much more quick and a shorter arm path. Now, I don't like it any better or worse than Malik's. It's just different, right? But you can see if we're looking just from the waist down, how Jamie likes to kind of keep his back foot connected all the way through the throw. And you can see his back foot kind of drag through the finish. It's almost like having an anchor there, which helps now stop our hips suddenly at the target. So you can see on Jamie's finish here, doing a good job once again stabilizing the front side. You can see how his left arm is rigid there and up. And you can see how his hips now are more stopped square to the target.
Coach, we have a question. Do you care about the front toe opening or just getting the foot past the midline?
Yeah, ideally, I wouldn't like it to open. I like the idea, quite honestly, of the foot being slightly angled closed. Once again, we're thinking about proximal movement, not distal movement. So I'm thinking about the hips. When we talk about the front foot and opening off the midline, what's truly happening here is the hip is starting to open. And the hip slightly opening is what's moving the front foot off the midline. So the pointing of the toe isn't a factor that is important to what we're trying to do. The argument of why I like the foot being actually angled closed is it helps that sudden stop, that deceleration phase, if that makes sense.
It probably helps the hip stay square.
Yeah, the front
Yeah.
toe kind of pointing to the target, and some QBs even go kind of past the target. That's just allowing the hip to open more than you want early on, which a lot of times will result in the quarterback kind of spinning all the way out or over rotating. Any questions kind of just on the throwing motion there? Like I said, the big things we're trying to hammer home here is just the idea of the good start, good finish. So here's a clip of Jamie. We'll just kind of let this run for a second. Here's the full speed. And you can see all we're talking about here is foot in the ground quick, arm fast, right? Foot in the ground quick. Whenever he decides to throw, I want him to get his foot in the ground as quickly as he can, control all the way through from good start to good finish. And this is maybe even a better look at how good a job he does of staying stable with the hip square to the target on that sudden stop.
So another question from a coach. He's
Yeah.
got a young quarterback who he wants to go, once he separates, wants to go directly to the vertical L. Has an extremely quick release, can throw it with power. He's young. Do you work with it to change it, or if it's natural, do you let him keep it?
That's the hardest question, right? And this is where, like, I think, you as you as a coach, if it's working for you, and you're getting the results that you're trying to get out of them, then I think that, and this is a point with everything we're going to talk about tonight. How much do you really want to mess with something that's working, right? I think there's an opportunity for us to embrace some of that individuality. Now, I do believe that the idea of getting to horizontal L is a crucial piece of a natural, fast, fluid throwing motion. And really what we're talking about here is the sequence. And not to go too deep into it, but the upper body sequence has to time up with the lower body sequence. If that makes sense. So if I kind of skip a step, because the logic here is, and I know QB coaches teach this, the logic here is, well, why go to here and then to here if I can just go here and then out, right? Doesn't that allow me to be quicker? The problem is I would worry that now am I risking my upper body being ahead of or faster than my lower body. So it's one of those things where there's no value in skipping a step. And there's another argument that, quite honestly, the idea of lifting to L and then changing direction out, as opposed to creating more of a natural, fluid, circular path. Although you would think logic would tell me if I skip a step, it's faster, you find with a lot of QBs, it's actually a slower motion. The idea of the arm going in one direction, the elbow having to pause and then change direction to the target is not as quick as a natural fluid motion. Fast and fluid is really all I care about when I talk about arm path. And if we went through these, Jamie, Malik, Carlos, you got a bunch of guys with
can I jump in for a sec?
completely different, unique throwing motions.
Yeah.
But all I care about is the arm is really, really fast. Let me bring up Carlos for a second, because
Coach, you've got somebody who wants to ask something real quick.
Real quick here on Carlos, because he is a guy who, similar to the quarterback that the coach probably has a tendency to lift a little bit to the vertical L. I'll see if I can slow it down here enough to kind of show this. So he separates. He doesn't quite get to equal and opposite. He's kind of got a higher separation and is very quick into the vertical L. Does that make sense? So you kind of seeing that, right?
Yes.
Why it works for Carlos is because he's so quick in his lower body and his rotation. So if you watch Carlos here, different than Malik, different than Jamie, there's zero linear movement involved in his throwing motion. His foot's in the ground quick and his hips immediately rotate. You can see that back foot really isn't moving at all, right? And you see Tom Brady go a little bit more of this type of throwing motion as well. So without getting too technical, the real answer to the question is, as long as whatever he's doing in the upper body sequences and times up with what he's doing in the lower body, then you're probably in good shape. Just continue to make sure he's consistent with the way he throws, and it's a repeatable throwing motion every time.
Thank you. Coach, did one of the coaches have something you wanted to share?
Hey, Sean. I don't know if you can hear me or not. This is Michael Bell out of Las Vegas.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, how are you doing? Hey, because I'm an NFA coach as well. But I just wanted to kind of hit that topic of that quick vertical L is that retraction and that to me is the most important part, because he's still getting that retraction here to get up to that L versus that horizontal L to rotate. So are we really clearing that bone out? That's the biggest part to me, is if the kid still has that retraction, I let it go. If he doesn't and he's not clearing that, then he might lead into some arm problems, and I just discuss it with them. I just wanted to, help out a little bit.
Great point. Mike, I'm with, obviously, so Mike, another National Football Academy NFA guy, so, we kind of come from the same school of thought with a lot of this stuff, but exactly right. And it's why you kind of preface that with, is it working for the kid? Because the point Michael's making is if the guy, if he's not creating, that scapular retraction, basically he's not unlocking his AC joint. He's not allowing his elbow to be able to elevate to the target. So if he's lifting and throwing and the whole motion kind of stays front side, he's not going to be able to get his elbow to lead the throw consistently. So to that coach who's asking about lifting, if he's not getting the retraction, the point Mike made, he's probably not going to be consistently accurate with that throw. And that would then lead to maybe the change you want to make. Does that make sense?
It does.
Cool. Thanks, Michael. All right, can I jump into some drills? Where are we at, guys?
Yeah, let's do it,
Pretty
Coach.
cool?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, like I said, the first 8 or 9 of these are all over Instagram and Twitter right now. So, not pretending that everybody has seen those, but I don't want to go crazy into something that you've seen a lot of already. So let me kind of give a quick overview of some of the drills we're talking about. And then, maybe I'll touch on a couple. And then if there's something that really sparked your interest and you want to talk more about, why don't you just ask me and I'll go into that one. So real quick, when we talk about a top to bottom drill series, it has to start with warming up the arms and shoulders, right? And, obviously we're, once again, quarterback coaches, I think in general, were later to this. The baseball guys understood this 10, 15 years ago of how important it was to, warm up to throw instead of throwing to warm up, right? So that first key point there, the arm shoulder warm up, there's a bunch of different things we do. There's some stuff that we kind of got Tom Houseman for a while of just kind of stationary, loosening up the shoulder joint. I'll be able to make all this stuff accessible for you guys. There's some drills we do where we walk off the sideline. We're working on kind of starting to free up the range of motion in the shoulders, kind of inside, outside as we walk. You see QBs. This is another kind of Tom House 90-degree, kind of a pro muscle drill. Just trying to get the arms warmed up. And then we've been fortunate, a guy named Caleb Longley, who does all of our arm care stuff for Quarterback Takeover. His company is Marv Training, and once again, he's another baseball guy. And he developed an entire 6-week training and arm care program for us. This is accessible as well. So however we figure this out, Pete, you're going to have to send me a bunch of emails or really just, I'll put my my social media up at the end and just, hit me on Twitter or Instagram and DM it, and I'll send you this whole thing. So basically, it coincides with this, this whole, band and plyo ball set. But, you can kind of use different plyo balls. You'll see bands with some different grips that you can utilize and get most of the value out of that. But, for us, it's kind of all interchangeable. This whole program is as much of an arm care as it is of a strength building in the off season. You can see kind of the idea is Jordan Yates from Milton, at Georgia Tech now. There you go, Pete DeWeese, little Milton shout out. but you know, kind of working through some different drills. So that's all in there. But I just threw it up there to talk about, you know, we'll do some version of that. You know, we were doing all the draft prep for our guys getting ready for the NFL this year. They love using the bands and balls in their warm up. From a normal training standpoint, just for time or quickness, we'll just go through some of the stationary stuff. So, but there should be something there. And from a high school coaching standpoint, you know, I had our guys just do it in like, not even pre-practice, but like pre-practice, right? Getting a little group of 4 guys, they know the drills very quickly, get their shoulders warmed up so we can get right into what we need to do in pre-practice and obviously into indie period. But the idea of doing something first is key. So then there's our natural throwing warm-up. And we don't have to go too deep in these. There's not going to be a lot of crazy new stuff that you've never seen before here. We talked about how important extension is out to the target. The initial extension, just the idea of starting with the elbow in the lead position and just simply extending up and out to the target. Just like I showed with the video of Malik throwing, the idea of his elbow getting past, or sorry, the ball extending past his elbow as he releases to the target. You can see just at 5 yards, we're isolating just that movement. Next thing we'll talk about is elevating the elbow. So it's a little different. I'll start quarterbacks in kind of this equal and opposite position, right? Like where they would be when they separated. We'll close the shoulder to the target. And then from here, we're just elevating that elbow up and out to the target. So once again, it's a isolated movement. And I have all this on video, so anything you need, I'll show to you. I don't want to overdo it with too much of the video on the easy stuff. So there's a variation of the elbow elevation, which is an arm across drill. Once again, I'm not going through all 10 of these drills every time I work with a QB, or you're certainly not going to do it in practice. But maybe we can pick or choose the 2 or 3 that are most helpful for getting our quarterbacks warmed up quickly. And hopefully we're isolating things that we need those quarterbacks to work on. So the arm across drill is one I would use for a quarterback who maybe is having his front shoulder open too quickly as part of his throw. So now we're going to isolate it, hold his arm across as we work that idea of the elbow elevating over. So you're going to tell the quarterback to stay completely stable with the front arm and not allow that shoulder to open. You know, you wouldn't need it unless you need it. And then this is a good drill to kind of focus on that for a quarterback who has that issue. Separation drill, now we're just trying to create the idea of the quarterback starting that really good start, equal and opposite movement. So the way we'll do that, very similar to the 2 feet stationary drill, is we'll have the quarterbacks all go this way. I'm square to my target here. I'll have the quarterback close the shoulder to the target. And now we're just going to work 1 practice separation and then all the way through on the next throw. So we're kind of creating that idea of being equal and opposite, getting a feel for that. And then we're going to use that motion to allow the quarterback to go all the way through. So for a quarterback I had who maybe is lifting right to vertical L, or a quarterback who's not separating his front arm, right, or a quarterback who's dropping instead of being flat, this is a drill I use to key in on that point, right? I have the quarterback get the feel for this good, nice beginning of separation, and then have him continue on that path on his normal throw. From there, we start to back up into our 2 feet stationary. So these first 5 drills, we're not using the lower body at all, right? We're isolating the upper body. The key here is we need the arm to be ready to go fast before we start including the lower body into the throw. There's nothing worse than starting to create lower body movement and create rotational power before our arm's able to go fast enough to keep up with it. So one of my pet peeves is when you see quarterbacks are warming up pre-practice or pre-game, unless it's the other team we're playing and I'm fine with it. But the quarterbacks would just pick a ball up and they're just kind of like half speed doing the entire throwing motion, right? The whole thing, we talked how important arm acceleration was in the beginning. The arm has to go fast every time I throw. And until the arm's ready to go fast, I don't want the lower body to be involved in the throwing motion. That's kind of the thought process there. Rotation drill I'll get into. I'll show you some video on that, so I'm going to skip it for now. But then we'll work up to our normal step and throw, our cross set, right? Last 2 steps of the drop. And then 90 flip drill is one that we'll throw in on the warm-up. And that's just the idea here of our quarterback allowing his eyes to take his hips to the hallway. once again, that idea of creating straight line, stable throws every time, and then executing the same throws. Let me pull up a quick clip here of 90 drill. I think, once again, I'm not, shattering your minds here with some of these drills. 90 drill is one that certainly you've seen before, and probably a lot of you guys do. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. And of course, I can't find it. Everybody see 90 drill as I'm going by? Could have sworn I pulled it. Maybe I didn't. Okay, I'm not going to worry about it. But so those are just some drills that, like I said, I would include as part of our warm-up. And it's all we're doing here is we're trying to create a series that we can kind of pull from, right? So if I'm trying to do a training session or I'm trying to work with my QB, I just want to make sure I have 2 or 3 things ready to go that hit the key points that I'm trying to focus on, and that I can kind of isolate key pieces that I want to work on in that session or that practice, if that makes sense. So as we go from the warm-up now, the next piece here is transitioning into both our on-platform and off-platform and movement drills. So these are the ones we'll get into a little bit. I'll start showing you some video, but really quick from an overview. We talked about throwing the same way every time. Good start, good finish, being fully stable, throwing the same way. So these 4 on-platform drills are designed to create some movement, but reinforce the idea of, regardless of what is happening before the throw, we're going to continue to throw the same way every time. Good start to good finish, arm fast, stop the hip square, sudden start, sudden stop. So shuffle, stabilize, shuffle, reset. I'll show you a couple of videos on those as we move forward. Then we'll progress. The next kind of set of drills that we do are drops or progression drills. Now we're adding the drop, adding some key quarterback footwork to the idea of being stable, creating straight line throws and throwing the same way. So just our rhythm drill, throwing, without a reset as we progress into our read. And then there's even a rush, I'm using R4 language, but rhythm, read, rush through our progression. The idea of having the eyes lead the hips to each new hallway. Then we'll go into some of our on the run or our off platform drills. First couple are kind of warming up the idea of how to throw off platform. It's creating the easiest versions of an on the run throw, so we can reinforce the key off platform throwing mechanics. And we'll talk about those. I know I went in depth on the on platform. I won't hang you out here on the off platform. We'll go into that as well. And then as we go to 3-cone drill, that's where we're creating kind of the more difficult scenario of some of these off platform drills. And then the last kind of category of drills that I have up here is our movement drills, creating kind of pocket movement. Quincy Avery, who's kind of the founder of Quarterback Takeover, we work very closely together these last few years, along with the rest of the QB Takeover staff. He has come up with kind of the idea of separating movement into both subtle movement and evasive movement. I just love those coaching points. I think it makes sense for us as coaches and as quarterbacks, the idea of just that little slight movement in the pocket to create time and space versus that evasive where we have to, with a sense of urgency, be able to move off our spot and avoid pressure. And so we have a few different drills there where we can work on those key points. So you guys tell me, do you want me to kind of start going through them and like pick a couple out of each one and show a bunch of video? Do you guys feel like you've seen a lot of this already on Instagram and Twitter, and you just want me to get into some of the newer stuff, some of the movement stuff? Kind of give me a little feedback on what you guys are looking for.
I think if obviously if anybody's got anything, feel free to put it in the chat or speak up. But I think if you'll walk us through some of what you would deem is the most critical or maybe foundational pieces of the early and the on platform, and then get us into I know, because a lot of the stuff is stuff I've incorporated, and I know, like, I love the subtle movement stuff you do. I know I'm a big fan of that.
Awesome. Yeah, we're going to hit it all. I just want to make sure I'm not, going too long. I see Terrence chiming in there. No, you're right, man. So what's the most important stuff, right? And that's definitely what I'll hit here. And then for Spencer there, I'll definitely get into some of the newer stuff. So here we go. So, we spent so much time talking about on-platform mechanics, right? And those key things that we want to make sure we're seeing every single time. And once we've established that from a stationary standpoint, now it's all about how can we make it more difficult without the quarterback losing those good mechanics. And so here's where we have these kind of the off-platform series of drills. The first one, just really quickly here, go into shuffle, stabilize. Like I said, all this stuff's going to be on Instagram and Twitter. And then DM me if you need anything that you can't find. But once again, here's those coaching points I just talked about. We want to work the drill, but the key is we want to throw the same way every time. And here's that coaching point I keep echoing. Don't let anything that happens before the throw affect the throw. We're going to throw the same way regardless of what happened before. So all we're doing here, and I'll let this run through, is we're creating some movement to the normal on-platform throw. So we'll have the quarterback, nice, easy base balance, just shuffle either forward or backwards. And then on the cue of either a clap or a ball call, we're having the quarterback stabilize first and then deliver with his good on-platform throwing mechanics, right? So you'll see the quarterback stabilize first, and then from that position, foot in the ground quick, stay vertical through the throw, control the finish, all those things that we've talked about before. Basically, as the quarterback's shuffling forward, a lot of times he'll have a tendency to lock out his front leg, tilt, and pull down, right? We're trying to create this forward movement that he has to resist. As the quarterback's going backwards, sometimes they'll have a tendency to get stuck on their back foot and not rotate through the throw. So we're losing power there. The big coaching point here is when I talk about this drill and I explain it to the QBs, I think about looking at it from this angle. And I tell the QB, if I was going to pause the video right before you threw, I shouldn't be able to tell on this clip, were you shuffling forward or were you shuffling backwards, right? Because we're going to stabilize, get to the same consistent pre-pass position before we throw. That's the idea there. I'm going to quickly go right into the next one because it's super similar. It's just our shuffle reset drill. So the only difference here is instead of kind of I guess, linear movement of the shuffle, we now have the quarterback shuffle laterally. You can see once again, I'm just harping on that. Doesn't matter what the drill is. Don't let anything before the throw affect the throw. So now the quarterback's laterally moving with the shuffle. And now on the cue, he has to let his eyes lead his hips to the hallway. So now he's working not only the idea of getting stable, but also consistently creating the off-platform throw. So you can see him move laterally. There he goes right. Here he goes left. Create the straight line throw first, and then deliver the ball the same way every time. And that's the big key here. I kind of paused that a little early. We'll get the next clip here. But the idea here is I don't want there to be any variable in the throw. So I don't want the quarterback in this drill to try to flip and throw all in one motion. I want him to flip, get perfectly stable, and then throw. Get a good view here. So you can see Jeff at this point has created a perfect straight line throw, right? This is the key. Once again, we talk about setting hallways. You can see his eyes are starting to go first. He's starting to turn his head here and try to pick up his target out of his peripheral view. Easy for me to say. You can see his eyes are leading his hips. That allows him to create the straight line throw. His foot's in the ground, perfectly stable, and then he throws, right? That's the idea here. A couple of variations I threw in here where now his back's to the target, going to his left side. He's having to work a little harder to let his eyes get his hips all the way around. But you get the point here. Create the straight line throw. Throw the same way every time. Don't let anything that happens before the throw affect the throw. Making the quarterbacks work a little bit more here side to side, but same idea here. They're going to set the hallway first. Good start to good finish. You see Richie's back leg comes up. He does a good job still of stabilizing, controlling that finish all the way through the end. Make sense to everybody? Any thoughts on those first two? we're in pretty good shape there.
You know, I think the big thing that knowing that I've done some of the same drills in the past is with the videos, you see how fluid and how quick everything is with the kids. You know, you talk about moving fast and fast, efficient movements, getting their feet in the ground, setting the hallway. Everything is so fluid. And I think so much of that comes from repetition. And I think that's the difference when you look at the approach you're taking. Maybe, and I know last year starting with our young quarterbacks, it was ugly, man. It was like watching an old cartoon. Everything was stop and go. But by the end of the season, that fluidity really started to show up with our young kids.
And that's it. I mean, there's no, cheat. There's no secret way of getting this stuff accomplished outside of just the repetition of it. I tell my guys that, there's guys that they got to be tired of hearing me by now, especially guys who've been working with me, for years. They must hear me say the same 20 things, or the same thing rather 20 times over an hour session. They're constantly hearing me say, you got to get stable before you throw. You got to control the finish. You got, stabilize the front side. I want them to the point where they're like falling asleep hearing these things in their head. And without that constant repetition and focus, and as a coach, not allowing them to get away with stuff, right? It's very easy, like on that first drill, as the quarterback's shuffling forward, to kind of allow him to kind of walk through the finish, right? And sometimes we get, well, that was a great ball. Because don't get me wrong, all that's affecting is a little loss of power. It's not going to affect his accuracy. So if the receiver is 15 yards away, he can shuffle right through, basically turn into an off-platform throw, walk through the finish, and then he can put that ball right on the receiver. But is that what you're focused on? Is that what you're trying to hammer into the QB? That's where I think us as coaches and really quarterbacks themselves have to have that discipline to not just get away with stuff, but continue to focus on doing it the same way every time.
I think a lot of times, other positions on the field, coaches spend a lot of time about making sure your drills transition to the play, right? And I think that quarterback is one of the positions where you don't see that all the time, because people don't do things full speed, and they don't, right? You're like you said, it can be an accurate ball, but when things are changing around you and things are happening in a hurry and you've got to drive that ball in there, you want to be able to harness all the power your body has, and I think that's where a lot of this made a lot of sense, not only for me, but for my kids this past year. And I thought more of it translated to their play than maybe some of the things I had been doing in the past.
Yeah. And quarterbacks want it. It's, I used to think the hardest thing to do is to correct the quarterback after he throws a great ball, right? And then, being around Quincy, I'm just around many more talented quarterbacks. So now think about telling Deshaun Watson he didn't do it right after he throws a great ball, right? But the coaches want, or the quarterbacks want that feedback. They want to continue to work. The guys that you're probably putting in position to be the leader and the starting QB on your team are the types of players who want that feedback. And, it's just about us all being disciplined and making sure, that we're staying focused on those key points. All right, so let's go into some of because Pete made a great point. Let's start kind of applying this stuff to actual things the QB does. So that's all about just staying stable, throwing the same way every time. So now we'll go into our rhythm drill. And this is the idea now of kind of working the quarterback's drop, right? When we throw on rhythm, we mean we're throwing off the last step of the drop. So think about a 3-step drop from the gun, 3-step rhythm throw, maybe a speed out or a spray out or a bang 8, or anything you're throwing off your first progression. We're not going to allow the quarterback to reset, which means his eyes have to lead his hips to the hallway on those last 2 steps of the drop. The last 2 steps of the drop are crucial for making sure that hallway's set and creating a straight line throw. It's also crucial for making sure the quarterback is stable before he throws, right? So that second to last step, right? We think of it like the 4th step on a 5-step drop from under center, or the 2nd step on a 3-step drop from the gun or under center. We have to catch the weight so that when we put the last step in the ground, we're stable and able to transition into the throw. So there's that point there that I was just making. And once again, because My guys are going to hear me say the exact same thing over and over. We want to throw the same way every time. So here, this isn't the drill yet. This is just what we're basing it off of, right? This is the thing everybody does with kind of an offset, cross-set throw. Last two steps of the drop should look like this. You can see Baxter doing a good job. The first thing that's going to happen is his eyes are going to start to move to his receiver. He's going to see what he's setting his hallway to. And as his eyes lead his hips, he's going to start to close his hip to the target on the cross step. So in this position, all he's done now is that catch or cross step, and he's already created a straight line throw. This is so important. This is why we talk about it taking 2 steps to set the hallway. So now his hallway's already set. It's much easier for him to get his back foot in the ground and be in position now to transition quickly into the throw. Same thing to the left side now. Now his eyes are going to lead his hips to the left, and it's going to start to open his hip on the cross. And once again, you can see he's already created the straight line throw, and now he can be stable and deliver. So the drill is creating and adding some movement to that idea. So all the quarterback's doing here is kind of dropping straight back on the line. Sorry, I'm slowing it down here. So you get a good look at that as well, but we'll get into the drill here in a second. So the quarterback is just dropping straight down the line. And then if I clap or give him a ball call, that's going to be his cue to let his eyes lead his hips to the hallway. You can see we'll just go all the way across the field. And now the quarterback's creating consistent straight line throws. Here's a clip of Zach going to his left. Once again, there's nothing fancy about this drill, right? It's just the idea of being super disciplined, creating the same straight line throw every time so we can get consistent results. We want to make sure every single time, 2 steps to set the hallway, straight line throw, control the finish. Little variation with Aaron because it just happened to have 2 receivers, so he's kind of working both sides in the same drill. So he can get that repetition of working right side, then left side. But here's the still shot. Just on that cross step, you can see his hips already closed when he's throwing to the right. And then in the next slide, you can see his hips already open when throwing to the left. Eyes lead the hips every time. You know, it's a simple drill. It's an easy drill, but we do it with the best guys that we train because there's nothing like establishing consistency in doing things the same way every time. Here's Jalen. You know, this is like the first week he came, starting to get ready for the Senior Bowl and then the Combine. You know, we were hard working the idea of being consistent, having his eyes open his hips, create straight line throws to the left side. You know, a quarterback that didn't work as much under center in his college career. So like I said, simple drill, but a really great one to just reinforce some key points. Cool to go to the next one or anything I need to hit on the rhythm stuff?
No, it's a great drill.
So now this is obviously, you see the next piece of rhythm is now if we're transitioning from second progression, right? So now think about like a normal hang concept, spot curl, you know, where I want the quarterback to be set to his rhythm first. That would be his spot route. And just like the last drill, every time the rhythm's open, we have to be able to throw it. So I want the quarterback to be in a really good pre-pass stable position to make the first throw. And then just to make the quarterbacks work a little harder, instead of just a spot to curl, we're creating almost a full 90-degree turn on this reset. So I alluded to the 90 drill that we'll do in warm-ups that I couldn't find the video for. This is the extended version of that. This is us adding movement, adding a drop to that drill. So you'll see Nate dropping straight back on the line. On the cue, he's going to set the rhythm first and then have his eyes lead his hips and reset to the second progression. So here's Max do a really good job. As we're watching this, I think I have a couple clips here where it's slow motion, where we can really see him do a good job of letting his eyes lead his hips to the target. You'll see his head go first, and then his eyes are leading his hips there. I think this is the crucial point as we're talking about creating consistent straight line throws, is you have to be set to the rhythm first, then you have to see what you're setting your hallway to create a perfect straight line throw on the second progression. So this is just what I call the read drill, rhythm to read. You can work this with a third progression and have the quarterback go all the way rhythm, have his eyes lead his hips to read, and then have him reset again to another target like he's working all the way through 3 progressions of a concept. But nothing fancy, but it's a good way. We do it with the youngest QBs we train, do it with all the way up to the college and NFL guys as well, just continuing to establish the idea of being consistent. There with Aaron, you saw basically just a normal spot to curl. Here with Pat, we're working more of a corner route. Change up the throws, change up trajectories. We're making Ethan here work all the way past 90. Make it difficult for the QB to work through it, but make sure that no matter what the throw, they're consistently creating the same straight line throw every single time. Consisting on rhythm, reset, and then once again, doesn't matter what we did before the throw is the same every single time.
A question that's not necessarily tied to this drill, but I think is relative overall. Somebody just sent a message and asked, do you monitor pitch count during the week?
It's a great question. Let's talk in season versus off season. In season, I think you have to be cognizant of it. But I very rarely have ever coached anywhere where it didn't just kind of happen on its own. I think the quarterbacks don't throw enough during the week, to be quite honest with you. With the exception of maybe the sophomore kid who takes every reps of scout team, he throws all the pass scale. That kid, maybe his arm's hurting. But your guys, your varsity QBs, the guys you're really worried about throughout the course of the week. Sorry, not that you're not worried about that poor sophomore quarterback, but I've never had it be a problem. Where it becomes a problem is, is he working with a private quarterback coach on the weekend, right? You have him all week, and is he stealing some extra time on Saturday, Sunday? Now, I'm a believer in that. I think it's a good time to isolate some key points. You just have to have a collaboration with that person in the same way that Pete and I have communicated whenever I've worked with his QBs or any of the other guys here in Georgia to make sure that we monitor that kind of together. In the off season, I think it's a great time for the quarterback to develop, to kind of build up his arm strength and allow him to be able to be more durable and handle more throws. It all goes to, is the quarterback using and utilizing efficient arm motion? If the quarterback's doing those things we talked about, keeping his shoulder closed, being fast and fluid, nice circular arm path, then the reality is he's not going to put strain on his shoulder or his elbow. He's not going to put pressure in situations that could cause him pain. He might have soreness, just in the same way if he did 200 curls, right? You're going to have soreness in the bicep and tricep, but that's why we want to try to increase the workload in the off season, just like you would in the weight room, for him to build more strength and more endurance. So hopefully that answered that question.
You addressed it a little bit earlier too. I think for a long time, and I know I did early in my career, I think too many people associated playing quarterback with pitching, when the reality is it's so much more like being at bat than it is being a pitcher, right? You can send a kid in the cage and have him hit 100 balls 6 days a week, and his body's going to get stronger, and he may get sore and tired, but he's not going to injure his body. You can't do that with a pitcher. And so with a quarterback, if it's efficient and if it's sound, he's not going to wear down the same way a pitcher would. You're not throwing curveballs.
It's right. I mean, baseball clearly puts a lot of strain on the shoulder and elbow. I equate throwing a football like a softball pitcher, right? The softball, pitchers can go out there and pitch every single day and throw as many, because it's a nice fluid. It's using the normal rotation of the rotator cuff, and you're not putting strain in a bad position. Now, it's not to say there's no value in the quarterback throwing 250 balls a day, 5 days a week, right? There's extremes to everything. But, can quarterbacks throw 100 to 150 balls 3 times a week? My big thing is just make sure whatever they're doing, there's an intended purpose for why they're doing it, right? If you have a quarterback go out and he's working, with the quarterback coach at your high school, he's working with a private trainer, and he's specifically working on 2 or 3 of these drills to isolate, then that's really good value of those. If he's out with, 6 of his teammates and they're just whipping the ball around on the high school field on a Sunday, I'm not sure there's any value in those reps. So just be smart about it would be my point. Cool?
Yeah, perfect.
All right, let me get into some off-platform stuff, because I promised you guys I would at least touch on those consistent mechanics we're talking about. So here's the good news here. when we talk about on platform versus off platform, we don't have to talk about anything different from the waist up. This is why consistency is so important. So from the waist up, once we close the shoulder to the target, the waist up is in the exact same position as it would be on platform. So we're still talking about equal and opposite on separation, fast and fluid with the arm path, great extension out to the target, and continue to stabilize the front side. So now on platform, off platform, that QB continues to hear the same corrections and allows him then to be able to self-correct if necessary. What we're changing here is how we set our hallway, how we create power. So basically we have a new pre-pass position. Couple key points here. I want to shorten the stride. And this kind of goes hand in hand with what we talked about earlier with the on platform, the idea of overstriding. It's the same idea. Just when the quarterback's running, the natural, form of a runner is a slight forward lean and big long strides. The problem is we know that we need our chest to be up. We have to stay vertical through the throw. We have to stay on the pole, right? You guys won't forget that one now. We want to continue to think of those mindsets. So in order for us to be in position to stay consistent in the upper body, we have to shorten the stride. Shortening the stride allows us to get our chest up and stay vertical through the throw. So key point there. Now, guys ask me, what do they mean? Because this used to be coaxed like, okay, we'll run and then we'll chop our feet 15 times and slow down before we throw. And obviously, we all know that's not a reality of what we're able to do. So I think of shortening the stride being the last kind of 2 steps before you throw. So equate it to your drop. We just talked about the last 2 steps of the drop. You kind of catch on that second to last step. Then you plant your last step of your drop, and then you're able to drive off that step. Same idea here when we're on the run. We're going to run as fast as we can. Most times we're either on a design rollout to get the edge or escaping pressure. So we better move. But then those last 2 steps, let me shorten my stride. If I'm a right-handed QB with my left foot first, that's kind of my catch step. Then I'm going to stick my right foot in the ground, and that allows me to get the chest up and also to drive through that right foot as I throw. As far as creating straight line throws, we want our hips square to the target, our shoulder close to the target. And now here's my model debut here. 2 different looks here. This one on the left, I'm actually running to the right. The one on the right, I'm actually running to the left. But you can see whether I'm going right or left, I'm creating the same straight line throw. You can see my feet are underneath my hips. So that's the idea here when we talk about shortening the stride. My feet are under my hips. My hips are square to the target. So think about your belt buckle pointing directly at the target, and then your shoulder being close to the target, if that makes sense. So as we kind of let this drill, the first one is just our downhill drill. This is the easiest version of an on-platform throw. We're allowing the QB here to attack directly downhill to target he's throwing, right? There's no easier on-the-run throw in the history of football. The beauty here is the hips are already square to the target. So all the quarterback needs to do is close his shoulder to the target and then shorten his stride so he can stay vertical through the throw. This is not a fancy drill. It's designed just to reinforce those same coaching points. So if the QB is struggling with shortening his stride, here's a drill to let him work through that. If it's a younger quarterback who's not quite up to speed with the idea of closing his shoulder consistently to the target, once again, here's a drill to help him work through those reps. And it's so important that we're creating movement. You can do these types of things stationary, but for the quarterback to kind of buy into it and get comfortable with how it all sequences together, you have to add the movement. So here I kind of slowed it down just to show that idea of, here's Sam Hartman at Wake Forest, and he looks a lot better than I do doing these things. You can see right before he throws, he's shortened his stride. He's got his feet under his hips. You can see his hips are square to the target and his shoulder is close to the target. Now he's created that straight line throw, and now all he needs to do is keep his mechanics the same to deliver that throw, right? Here's another clip here as he goes off to the left side. I'll let it run through, and then I'll pause it again on the slow-mo. You can see him do a good job there. Regardless of what angle he's escaping at, he's closing his shoulder every time to the target. And here we go again on that still shot. Hips are square, shoulder closed. You can see he has his feet underneath his hips. So it's always hip square, shoulder closed. That should be, once again, that coaching point that your QBs are tired of hearing you tell them. Just a good way to continue to reiterate those points. Let me give you the 3-cone drill, because I just kind of talked through some of this today. So if downhill off platform is the easiest version of an off platform throw, straight downhill to target, for our QBs who are ready for it, let's give them something that challenges them a little bit more. And here's a clip of Jamie from a little while ago when he was still at Wake. Just 3-cone drill. So you can kind of see these cones out here. You see the one off to the left. There's one straight down the middle. There's another one to the right. So we just label those cones 1, 2, 3, going left to right. And now whatever cone I call, I force the quarterback to escape on that angle. So I call 2 there. He has to go straight downhill. Now I call 1. He's escaping to the left. So regardless of the angle he escapes, he still has to create a straight line throw to the target, right? It's still hip square, shoulder closed. We're trying to create more difficult versions of all these off-platform throws. But for the QB, nothing changes. He knows he has to shorten his stride, square the hips, close the shoulder, and then stay vertical all the way through the throw. That's kind of the idea there. And just like all the drills we did earlier, just like the on-platform ones, you know, we start out with an easy version of just the shuffle stabilize, and then we start adding the reset, the lateral movement. We try to, you know, create more and more difficult situations that quarterbacks have to kind of work their way through. Just a good way that we coach it first, we teach it, and then this is kind of the test to see how well the quarterback is at understanding how to execute those coaching points. And then you'll see some things that need improvement, and now we can go back and address those key issues. What do we got? Any thoughts? Anything you guys are dying to see? I know I'm going crazy long here. I want to let you guys jump into if anybody's got value to add or anybody wants to talk through some stuff. But I gave you the quick overview of the drills. Was there one I mentioned that anybody's dying to see that I didn't talk about, or anything I need to clarify a little bit more?
Feel free to type it in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask, coaches.
Cool.
Yeah, you know, I know one person had asked in the chat, and I responded. But he asked if specific drills to work eye progressions, and obviously tying eyes to our feet.
Yeah.
And I said the rhythm and read drills. I think you've done some other things in the past. I know I've done them and borrowed some stuff from you and from the R4 camps and different things. You know, where you really don't even have to have receivers. Obviously, it helps, but just as long as you understand what the concepts are and the quarterbacks understand where those landmarks are, you know, I think there's simple ways for us to adjust through that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, quarterback. So Dub Maddox. So I was talking about R4 earlier. You know, Dub Maddox created that whole R4 system, and you know, so he teaches within that concept. So all of his passing concepts are built with that progression, and it's based on coverage, and there's some variations, but the QBs know in this concept what my progression is. And a big part of their drills in their indie period is just calling a concept and having all QBs at the same time drop and go rhythm, reset to read, rush, and then release, right? Work through kind of on air, to your point, Pete. Don't even have to throw the ball. It's the idea of having your eyes lead your hips, because that timeline isn't going to change regardless of what the defense does. That's a constant progression. You can't be too early or too late to any route. So that's exactly right. I tell guys with that rhythm or read drill, quarterbacks that are struggling, and usually you see it to their offhand side, right? Quarterbacks have trouble working that real aggressive turn at the top to create the straight line throw to their left if they're right-hander. I tell QBs, you can do that in your family room. Like, look at the TV. You're watching it anyway. As long as you have like 5 feet to drop back a little bit, drop back straight, looking at the TV, and then like set your hallway to the couch, right? Or to a little comb you put in the corner, to your mom or whatever, right? But you can get a lot of work there without a coach, without a receiver, without even a football, because all we're trying to do is establish those key principles first of creating straight line throws and being stable every time. Then we can build from there.
I'll say this, guys. If your weight room if you've got your kids in weight training and your weight room can facilitate it, with even if it's just a small hallway, it's very easy to, find and steal 30 seconds here and there between sets where kids just go out and work the drop and work set in the hallway, different directions. And that's fantastic, especially for young quarterbacks. I know in the summer sometimes I'll grab my young guys, and if we've installed something on the board and we're going to go do it later that day in the summer, I'll just get them outside our weight room on the concrete, and we'll just real quick, I'll take them through their drop and have them set the hallway. I'll call the formation to play, talk to them about what route they're looking at, and just it's a great way to just start ingraining it into your young guys.
No doubt. I'm seeing some questions popped up, so I'll kind of go down the list. Lori and Justin. So talking about how to get a QB to be more rotational than a weight shift. I talked about minimizing linear movement, but I don't want to make you guys think that there's not a natural weight shift there, right? And this is one of the things that, depending on how much you guys are really involved in watching quarterback coaches kind of give their opinions, it's become kind of vogue of late to be all rotational, like really kind of forced, no kind of athleticism, just turn. I think that's maybe one extreme. I do think there's going to be a natural hip slide and a natural weight shift from the back foot to the front foot. That's part of the rotation. Where it becomes a problem is if it's too much, right? If they're now tilting or leaning or they're getting too long. You'll see quarterbacks, think about Aaron Rodgers or Matt Ryan when they're loading up to throw a 50-yard deep ball. There will be definitely some more linear movement and some little bit more of a weight shift on those big throws. You can even pausing, it looks like maybe he took too long of a stride. They'll offset that by being longer in their upper body motion. We talked about the sequence earlier. As long as it times up, they're good. But there is a weight shift. We just don't want it to be one that causes us to not be able to rotate the hips or one that causes us not to be able to be stable. But I'm glad you asked the question because I do have one drill that I meant to get to and forgot. And we just call it the rotation drill. I told you earlier in the beginning that was one of the drills. I told you I'd get back to it. So assuming now I can find the rotation drill, it's got to be one of these non-numbered ones. There it is with Jamie. All right. So the idea on the rotation drill here is we are going to isolate the quarterback's movement completely. So we're not going to allow him to stride. We're going to start him in a position where his front foot's already in the ground. And we're not going to allow him to move his back foot. We're going to say, okay, your back foot can pivot onto the toe, but it can't drag forward. So basically now we're isolating the QB and creating an only rotational movement. Once again, this is a drill in order to stop a QB who maybe has a tendency to overstride or lean forward. I'm not telling you guys that this is the way I want a QB to throw. I think the idea of being able to create good rotational power in a confined space is a good trait to have when the situation arises, when you can't step into the throw. But it's not, in my opinion, the most efficient way to generate power all the time. Because you can see here with Jamie, we are not allowing him to step or fully finish all the way through. We're forcing that sudden start, sudden stop. The key coaxing point, once again, stay on the pole, stay vertical through the turn. You can see how it really kind of hammers in that idea of the quarterback being stable all the way through the throw. I got one more look at it real quick here with Sam. Same idea. Here's Pete a little bit here with Sam. You can see how he kind of likes to keep his front foot slightly closed, is what we talked about earlier. So you can see as he sets up for this drill, his front foot's a little bit more closed on that 45. That's the way I would be my preference. And you can see that'll help him stop his hips more suddenly on the finish. But once again, when Sam throws normally, his back foot will continue to rotate. It'll still stop his hip square, and his back foot will finish behind the front foot. But it's certainly not as pronounced as this. So we just can't stress that enough. This is just a drill to work one point. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you having your quarterbacks actually throw like that. If that makes sense. Okay, interior elbow pain. So this is what we're talking about with the how much can a quarterback throw. Elbow pain's an issue, right? And we have to understand kind of what causes it to kind of understand how to stop it. So elbow, when pressure gets put on the elbow, it's normally caused by the front shoulder opening too early. So if the front shoulder opens too early, it now causes the arm to get dragged behind the body, right? We talked about we want the elbow to get to a lead position. When the shoulder opens too early and the arm can't go fast enough, it gets stuck, right? And now that motion of the arm kind of being dragged behind puts a lot of pressure on the shoulder. Now your body's going to help relieve that pressure of the shoulder. You know how it does it? It opens up the elbow. So the elbow now will orbit to take pressure off the shoulder. Well, all that does is put the pressure on the elbow. There's the point Pete was making about throwing curveballs, right? Or sidearm pitchers or things of that nature. So the big key here is, once again, and you're right, Jason, I'm not seeing the video, but it's something you see a lot. I would be concerned that his front side's opening too early and is putting pain or pressure. Your arm's going to tell you what's going on. Pain's never something we should be feeling. Muscle soreness is fine. Pain is like, stop what you're doing and let's fix it. So I would work on some of those drills we talked about of really keeping the front side closed, right? Not allowing the front side to open. I alluded earlier to that arm across drill, and I think I just saw it a second ago here, so I can find it again. Here's what we're talking about. We're not letting that front shoulder open at all. This is just a drill, once again, isolated movement, where we're only allowing the quarterback to elevate his elbow through to the target and keep his front shoulder closed. Here's a good way to start to train good arm acceleration from the quarterback and not rely on his shoulder to start the throw, but allow his arm to be moving forward before his shoulder opens. The more you can focus on his shoulder staying closed, the more you'll start to relieve some of that pain from his elbow. Hopefully that makes sense. You okay, Pete, if I just kind of work through these questions?
Yeah, go ahead, Coach.
Okay. I don't have drills that work mesh, at least not in this drill series here. You know, my world right now is the private quarterback scene. And so we're trying to nail down a lot of non-negotiable pieces that kind of are evergreen, right? That kind of work within everybody's scheme. But that's not to say that, you know, when I'm working with QBs who are based in an RPO or a mesh or an option system, that we're not certainly working through that footwork. I do those as kind of live speed reps. So I think about, say I have an hour training, I might do, you know, 5 minutes in that warm up, pick the couple drills I want to focus on, 5 to 10 minutes. And then I want these 2 drills. So I just gave you, 14 drills. We'll pick 2, maybe 3 I want to work. And then the last 20 to 30 minutes, I want game speed reps. Pete made the point earlier, the biggest thing we need to do is connect these drills to things that actually happen on the field. So we want to make sure we get to that as quickly as possible. So I would have a QB, and this is where, you know, you just open to communication. Anytime, you know, you guys as quarterback coaches, if you do have a QB who's working with a guy like me, a private coach, that communication is so important. So you tell me what you guys want to do. You know, what footwork do you utilize? What do you want him to work some extra mesh? He's with me anyway. I'm going to put an eye on him and try to help him. So the more we're using your scheme, or I just open up to QB, especially with the college guys, and say, hey, what are you guys doing? You know, hey, explain to me what you do on this throw. You use a little mesh, it's an RPO. What's your footwork look like? All right, we're going to do that. The closest drill I kind of have for it is that shuffle reset drill that we showed earlier. You know, like I think of it like a lot of teams that run kind of that jet sweep or fly sweep across the body, and they're riding through, and then they flip the hips to be able to throw, a post, or, obviously if you're a little bit more inside zone, it's not quite the same. You might not be shuffling through it, but it's definitely the idea of you're setting one hallway for the mesh, and then your eyes need to lead your hips as you flip to the second hallway. There's a lot of good stuff out there. QB coaches working different angle throws, and if you're just trying to pull and get the ball out quick and around defenders, there's a lot of good stuff that I've seen on social media. But I don't do a ton of that stuff from a drill standpoint. I'm looking at R4 language for drops. Yeah, I'm an R4 guy. So for me, I talk about progressions being rhythm, read, rush, and then release. Release being, hey, my timeline's down. I can't expect protection that long. So now I either have to create time and space by utilizing escape, or I have to throw the ball away or run. But for drops, yeah, like in quick game, I like the idea of a pop drop to get the ball out quickly. Once again, we want to be proximal. So I want to think about my hips setting the hallway more than like my feet moving, if that makes sense. I know it's a kind of tough one to verbalize. But the key point I can't stress it enough in my world is I don't overcoach footwork and drops, because there's nothing more important than making sure my guys are just doing what their coaches are asking them to do. And that's good or bad, right? Like even if your coach is having you doing some silly stuff, right? It's not my place. And I tell my guys all the time, like, you play with him, you play for him. So we want to make sure that, we are continuing to work on the things you're being asked to do within your system. So that's kind of my thought on drops real quick. Let me do some pocket moves. Am I killing you guys? Everybody like trying to go? And all right. So like I said, you're not hurting my feelings if people need to log off. I know it's late and everybody's got stuff to do. So, but I see some movement questions. I did tell you I'd get into some of that subtle or evasive movement stuff. Non-negotiable drill, my favorite. Let's go into some of this. I love the 3-cone drill. That one I showed you with Jamie. The reason I love the 3-cone drill is it's just so versatile, where I can create all these different angles and types of throws. I can make it an off-platform drill. I can also make it what we call break and claim, the idea of the quarterback escaping, but then putting his foot in the ground, setting his hallway, and making a stationary throw. So within that drill, I can create 40 different scenarios of different types of throws. I can move the receiver around and make, different level throws and different trajectory throws. And so that's kind of my thought process there. I like any drill that I can get a lot of variability out of, if you will. All right, so without boring you too much, let me go into some of that subtle and evasive stuff, because it'll tie into that movement question that we got. And this is stuff nobody's seen yet on Twitter or Instagram. So here's the new stuff. So the first one we'll talk about is single line. And this is, once again, nothing super fancy. It's just the idea of creating kind of simple base balance in the pocket and what we call our subtle movement. You can see just 3 cones in a row. He starts out just kind of creating a circle around. So my coaching cues are reverse or over, right? So you can see I'm saying reverse and he's changing direction. And then on the over call, he's just making a slight little subtle lateral movement, right? We used to call in NFL like an A-gap escape. You can see with Sam here, we don't care if it's back foot first or front foot first. That's another hot topic of discussion all the time in QB coach circles, but we just want the quarterback to move. And we don't want him thinking about which foot he's using to move. Let's just move. The reality is we're going, as you see Sam here, the receiver's offset. He's going to have to reset his hallway anyway to the throw. So moving with the back foot outside of a very small percentage of times doesn't create much of an advantage for the QB. So here's just a nice simple, you see a bunch of reps of this. Let me get you another clip so you're at least seeing a couple different guys do it here. Same idea here. You can see him working lateral movement, front foot, back foot, doesn't matter. And then once again, we're not going to let anything that happens before the throw affect the throw. So you see this finishes with a straight line on platform throw. Same drill will also utilize off-platform throws, right? So here's Max, who's at New Hampshire right now. Same drill, right? Working around the cone, reverses, overs, and now on the clap or the ball call, he's escaping out. So here's a drill where you can create some variability. We're using the subtle movements, but depending on what you want to work on, he can either set his feet and make a stationary throw, or he can escape out and make an off-platform throw. So that's what we call our subtle movement. The idea there in a subtle movement is we want the QB to maintain his base and balance and his stability the entire time. So as we work through this drill, regardless of the movement, you can see the QB's eyes and hips are downfield the whole time. His feet are underneath his hips. Malik didn't do a great job there, but ideally his heels are in the ground the whole time, right? So he's fully stable all the way through the movement is kind of what we're looking for there.
I'll say this, Sean. This was pretty much every Tuesday for me during special teams. Me and the quarterbacks were in the end zone working this drill, and I got it from you and Quincy. And the thing I liked about it was it was such a good way for me to reinforce all the pre-throw things that we talked about, right? Because it was about quick feet and it was about maintaining balance, and we were able to go through it all. And, you know, I could use whatever field space I had available. Even if I didn't have enough room to throw the ball, I could still be effective and make them set the hallway and simulate the throw with the towel that I keep in the QB bag or bin.
Yeah.
You know, so that was a great one for us. And I know, Terrence, you were talking about what does it look like Indy through a week. Every Tuesday, damn near during the season, during special teams, that's what my Qs were doing.
Yeah. I think I appreciate you chiming in there. You know, it's funny because, you know, sometimes QBs will focus on the drill, and I have guys do it too, and they're just so happy to be moving their feet quickly and keeping their base, and then you'll clap and you'll get the most ridiculous version of an on-platform throw that you've ever seen. It's like they're just happy the drill's over and they can throw the ball away, right? And to your point, Pete, it gives you a good opportunity to say, listen, the most important piece of what we're doing is that throw you're making, right? The drill's honestly kind of, you know, some bullshit a little bit, right? He's just kind of, we're just creating some movement, and, you know, it becomes less and less game-like the more we have the quarterback working through some different things. But we're just trying to create some difficulty, add some movement, create a little bit of pressure. But man, the most important part is set your feet, create a straight line throw, and control that finish. So like you said, really good job there, a good opportunity to reinforce those things. So from single line, we go into multiple line. I got a couple clips of this. And the idea with multiple line here is it now adds an evasive movement to the subtle movement. So what we're going to see here, and this is Malik working through, it's just a normal single line, but you can see he's got other lines to either side. So the quarterback coach or whoever's running the drill is going to continue to give him the reverse and over movements, but then he'll also visually point him to evasively move over. So the difference here for us between subtle and evasive is on the evasive movement, we just want to get away. We want to create space. So we're going to allow the QB then to give up his base and balance and some of his stability in an effort to just move quickly. You can see here, Malik's in the middle of his evasive movement. He now has his whole body square to the target. So he's no longer in position to throw, right? In the single line drill, I talked about how important it was that the quarterback was ready to throw the whole time in the drill, eyes, hips, downfield. But on this evasive movement, we can't worry about base balance anymore. We need to get away from this pressure that's coming. Then how quickly can we get back to a position where we're under control and ready to throw again? So a little bit of a change there. I got another clip here where I think we did it more of a group setting. So you can see a bunch of QBs going. You know, I can envision this if I have 4 or 5 QBs on my high school team. Let's just get them going all together. If I'm lucky enough to have 4 or 5 receivers, then I can have 4 or 5 receivers catch. If not, to your point, Pete, just have them work the drill, set their feet, and throw. Now, the end of this one's a little different because we're creating, as I said earlier, a bunch of different techniques. So you'll have the quarterback closest to me will just set his feet and throw. You'll have the next QB in will work that break and claim. So you see the kid in the white shirt, second in, will escape with a sense of urgency, but then he'll stop, get under control, and make a stationary throw. And then the inside QBs in the middle are just going completely off platform. So here's what I'm talking about with, here's one drill, the footwork, we're working the subtle, we're working the evasive, and now I can create all these different types of throws if I want to. And just a really easy thing for you to kind of take control of and get maximum reps in a short amount of time with your QB group. Last evasive drill I want to show you real quick is circle drill. So same idea. The coaching points are the same. Same coaching cues. We're still saying reverse. Now instead of over, we're saying through. So if you remember single line, it's just reverse and over. And we talk about on the over call, we're going to maintain our base and balance the whole time. Now when we call through, that's an evasive movement that I'm calling for. So we're going to tell the QB, I want you to move as quickly as you can from whatever side of the circle you're on to the other side, quickly as you can, and then reestablish your base balance. So as Malik's working around, here's just a couple reverse calls. He's just maintaining his base. But you can see on the through call, he's now trying to quickly move across the circle. And once again, we're going to allow the QB on that evasive kickback or this evasive move across or back up front. We're going to allow the QB in that situation to sacrifice his stability slightly to move quickly, but then get back into a position where he can throw. I have another clip here where I think you see it a little bit better. Looks like I'm buying movies now. Here we go. One more clip here where I think the quarterback's working a little bit harder to move more evasively. So here's Jamie. You can see on the through call how quickly he's trying to get across the circle. Let that play through one more time. I got another good clip of Malik here as well. These are all on platform throws. It's just what we asked them to do. So once again, off this drill, we can create either on platform or off platform throws. But you can see on the through call, he's turning his hips, turning his shoulder. He's just moving and then getting back on base. So a good drill where we can combine both the idea of subtle and evasive movements. And then I thought I had a rep here with an off-platform version of that, but it doesn't matter. You get the idea. Same drill. He's moving evasively on the through call, getting across as quickly as he can, but reestablishing a good stable base and throwing the same way every time. Cool. How we doing? Questions are good. Terrence, you want to talk Indy? Yeah, Pete hit on a little bit. You know, I'm a big believer in trying to steal as much time as you can and then maximizing your time. So depending on, you know, if you're a team that kind of two platoons your guys, then I'm stealing every special team period. If we have like tackle circuit and like my head coach is okay if my QB's not doing it, I'm stealing that time. You know, there's even moments if maybe we're doing pass pro, you know, with my varsity QB. And the O-line coach is maybe leading that session. And you know, depending on how much coaching your QB needs from your QB coach. If you have that luxury, I know a lot of you guys are the head coach, OC, and QB coach, and you don't quite have that one. But I'm trying to steal as much time as I can. And my thought process is I always think first about the guy who needs to be ready to play Friday night, obviously. And so everything I do in an indie period and every time I can steal, I'm thinking from the mindset of basically I'm just privately training that one kid. Now, your backup better be pretty darn close to being ready to go as well. So we're realistic here. But so Terrence, you know, think about all these different drills. You know, in a course of a week, I would maybe do 2 different ones each day. Or if it's a week I'm going into and I know we're throwing a lot of spring out, a lot of rollouts, just a package that's going to work for us, then I'm hard into those off-platform throws. You know, if we might have something that, you know, look at maybe some of the throws my quarterback missed previously and maybe missed a lot of throws to his left, then, man, we're going in pre-practice or that first special teams period, and we're just working rhythm drill across the field, back the other way, across the field, back the other way, just having that QB establish throws to his left. You know, I think the whole mindset here, and hopefully you guys are getting some value by all these drills being out there, is I just want you guys to have a lot of tools that you can use however you think you need to use them, you know, and you should never be, oh man, what am I going to do at Indy today? Because, you know, drills are drill. You just know what you need to work on. You guys are all smart coaches. Now, hopefully this is a tool to help you address the thing that you want to work on anyway. I don't think there's any right or wrong. The two things I love is, like, again, stealing as much time as I can and be disciplined. Not only does it, you know, sex, you know, I've been at places where, like, during punt team, the quarterbacks are like in a huddle taking a knee with their helmets off. Right? You know, I want to make sure my QB is like, he's working, not so anytime somebody's looking, he's doing another drill. It just helps promote that idea of leadership. And as we talked earlier, the guy you put in that position probably wants that anyway. And then the second point for Terrence and everybody else is I'm a big believer in incorporating as many of the younger QBs as I can. So if you're in a situation where your freshman team practices separately, but maybe around the same time, I'd be begging my head coach or my OC for, hey, let them come up during Indy and work Indy with me. You know, these are the building blocks for the next 3-4 years for your program. And once again, this not to come across like you're better than your 8th grade QB coach or your freshman QB coach or whatever, but you know, eventually they're going to be playing for you, and the more you can get them used to the way you coach and the things you're looking for, the better. So be a couple key points that, you know, I would think about from a practice standpoint.
I think one thing that you said when we met last year too that just was simple and made a lot of sense was, you know, practice what's in the game plan and what you're going to face. You know, and you know, if we're playing a team that's going to pressure us a lot, we're going to work more off-platform stuff that week than we do against a team that I don't think they have a great pass rush. You know,
no doubt. And then the other thought of that is, you know, because I kind of said the negative version of it, like, well, what are some throws he missed and what can we work on? The real piece is what can we add to his toolbox that he doesn't already have? You know what I mean?
The log I sent out, I don't think it's done yet.
Check your mute, Coach.
You're good. I just want to make sure it wasn't a question. I'll talk over it. So, yeah, you know, like, I know we did it with, so I was fortunate enough to not only train a kid like Aaron McLaughlin, but I was also his high school quarterback coach. So, you know, this is a really unique opportunity to, you know, take time in Indy to work on, like, what's another thing we can add to his, you know, he does a lot of things really well, but can he be better on a flag escape out to the left and still be able to throw the ball down the field with some velocity? So, you know, maybe he didn't fail at it in the last game, but let's kind of continue to add something. So
you got 2 more questions, Coach. Let's knock those out and then let's go to bed.
Okay, so so for the slow-mo, I think I just recorded those in slow-mo, right? So I do a lot of that because I know I'm going to want to look back at it in that way. But iMovie allows you to just take a clip, like, so an iPhone, right? Take any video you have and, like, put it into iMovie. You can see how technically sound I am here. Just put it into iMovie, and then there's like a thing on the bottom where you can slow the speed down or speed it up. So that'll allow you to take any video to slow motion. Huddle Technique can do it. I use eCoach. You know, I don't think anybody even knows what eCoach is anymore, but there's a while back when the rest of the Elite 11 crew, we were all kind of using eCoach as kind of a platform. You can do it in Coach's Eye as well. So any of those types of, you know, they're all the same, but iMovie is a simple one. Like, I get a ton of QBs, and, you know, I'll throw it out there now. If any of your guys want to just send me video, you want to send me video of your kid, I'm happy to take a look and break some stuff down. I'll just do that. I'll just save it out of my DM, put it into iMovie, and I can slow it down nice and easy. iMovie allows you to do a voiceover as well, right? So depending on, you know, how comfortable you feel giving your quarterback some feedback on their mechanics, have them send you a video, especially now when we're all quarantined and you can't see them. Have them send you a video. They're out throwing with their dad anyway. Have them send you a video, put it into iMovie. You can slow it down, and then you can voice over right into it. Hey, Bob, good stuff here. Hey, think about getting that foot in the ground a little quicker. And remember, we talked about staying tall through, you know, stay on the pole, that type of thing. Send that back to them, right? Just quick things like that, reiterating those key points go a long way. And then, Nick, talking about keeping your shoulders on a level plane. I assume we're talking about, and Nick, if you're still there, kind of help me through this. Are we talking like the transition from the last step of his drop where his back shoulder's dipping before he throws? Or are we talking like maybe on a deep ball, he's trying to create a little trajectory on the throw?
No, it's more at the top of his drop. He likes to drop that back shoulder, and then it ends up doing like a catapult type motion with his throwing motion. And
yeah. So
didn't know if you have any good drills to kind of work on keeping that shoulder plane throughout the drop.
Yeah, the first thing is like, let's focus on what's actually happening. He's just losing stability at the top of the drop. So when I see that, it's cool because, like, here's the good news. It's not a throwing mechanic issue, right? Like, some of those things get super technical and hard to fix. This sounds like he's just not transitioning into those last two steps of the drop well enough. So I'm going to kind of use my feet as hands here. This is going to be terrible, but as we talk about taking the last two steps of the drop, we want to make sure on that catch step. So as we transition, let me see if I can do this. Here's my third step, right? Third step's in the ground. My base is pretty wide. As I go into my fourth step now, I want to make sure that step gets in the ground quickly. I want to have a nice short catch step, go from 3 to 4. Now I'm able to catch my weight quickly, which allows me then on my fifth step to get back into my consistent base. That was harder with the reverse camera than I needed it to be. Think about the rhythm drill I showed earlier. We talked about 2 steps to set the hallway. It's also 2 steps to get stable. So when I see a quarterback who's hitting his back foot and kind of falling back and having his back shoulder dip, it's usually that he's not catching well enough on the second to last step and allowing himself to stay stable. Remember, we want to throw from the same position every time.
Right.
Start with them just getting comfortable throwing without movement, and then go to the cross set drill and just have them work those isolated 2 movements. And the big coaching point there on the cross set drill should be making sure that after he sets his hallway on the last step of the drop, that he's throwing the same way he always throws. And kids get this. Like, if they were 15 yards away making stationary step and throws and hitting the target accurately every time, and then you say, okay, let's go to cross set, and now he's all over the place, this is a good opportunity for you to say, hey, listen, the only thing that's happening differently is that you're not stable before you throw, right? We didn't change anything else. Your throw mechanic, you didn't suddenly forget how to throw. You throw great when you're fully stable and under control. So not that you need a video on cross set drill, but all we're talking about here is having them take those last 2 steps of the drop, get fully stable, and then throw the same way every time. So this position after the cross set with his shoulders level should be the exact same pre-pass position he has every single time when he's throwing without the movement.
I'll say this, Nick, my kid does it every now and again, and a lot of his, I think, has to do with the last step of the drop, he overstrides. Yeah. And that back hip, the knee kind of turns and the back hip kind of drops, and it's hard for him to get back up. So we use the crossover set drill as part of our warm-up every day, constantly reminding him about being quick, getting that foot back in the ground, I think was good for him. And just to be honest, the other way to cheat it, right, don't make him drop. Let him build in a cheap play action fake that puts him in a real quick crossover set instead of getting into a traditional drop, right? Give him a quick little belly ride and let him come out of it, and it's going to help him stay tall. So I know in particular with my kid, he's probably better like that than he is in a true drop. But obviously you can't do that all the time. But that's how I've helped my kid with that.
Sure.
And really, he doesn't have to cross over on that step either. We're all used to like the idea of a quick 3 as well, right? And the only difference between a 3-step drop and a quick 3 is he doesn't cross over on that second step. He just kind of puts it in the ground and then comes to his base, right? So that's a tool that normally we utilize if we want to speed up the timing of our drop a little bit to get the ball out quicker. But in your case, Nick, to Pete's point as well, if that is easier for the quarterback and he's getting more consistent stability, roll with it. As long as it times up to the routes you're trying to throw, there's a lot of leeway there.
Yeah, and I just recently got moved back to quarterbacks, and this kid's, supremely talented. He's going to be a P5 kid easy.
Yeah.
So I just got some
you got dudes, Nick. You got dudes.
What do you coach, Nick?
I'm a passing game coordinator at Clay Chapel High School in Alabama, Birmingham.
Oh, okay, cool, awesome.
Former Alpharetta guy, though.
Well, I knew the name. I was gonna say, I'm like, wait, I
Yeah.
thought you were still in Georgia.
No,
Good
I
for you, brother.
moved last season. I was with Alpharetta for a long time.
Yeah. So, good stuff, man.
Man, Coach, I truly appreciate it. I know I've got a handful of notes and I've got it recorded. So I feel really good about it. But I know I've been getting messages from guys that were on the night and some that had to leave early, and everybody I think is fired up and got some good stuff. So appreciate all you guys coming. You see, he just put his social media in the chat, QB Coach McEvoy. You could look him up. You can go back to my tweets today and find his Twitter, and his Instagram handle's the same. Again, Sean, truly appreciate it, man. I trust you, and I know you do a good job, and that's why I was excited to have you on, because I knew you'd share some good stuff with these guys. So we appreciate it, man.
I appreciate everybody's attention. I know we went deep, we went long there, but
that was
I appreciate
awesome.
you guys hanging in.
It was awesome. Fellas, if you need anything from me, feel free to holler at me. You know, I'm on Twitter. You can always find me, and man, this was fun. Now I'm fired up because I'm meeting with my quarterbacks on Zoom tomorrow at 1. So we're gonna revisit some of the things we've done and start pressing forward. So appreciate y'all, man. I'm gonna go ahead and shut this thing down. But have a blessed evening and stay safe.
Thanks, Pete.